just checking 50 to 100 folks plus have been actually tuning in post. So it may not work for the schedule for folks to dial into the webinar, but these are all recorded and available post the sessions, which is a good practice, Cindy. But I think the main thing that I wanted to convey is the university is a strong partner of HTDC's, and we value these SBIR and SIDR opportunities, so much so that we are introducing some programmatic activities to help drive more engagement, not only in alignment and collaboration with HTDC, but also within the UH community and outside. So that's number one. Number two, for those who don't know about it, but SB 2806, I would draw your attention to that. It is a new bill that's been introduced by Wakai and others, Senator Wakai and others. And it specifically is calling out funding for phase 0, right? We all know what happened last year. So please look at 2806. We submitted testimony. I encourage others to submit testimony, get your network out and call folks to submit that one, because that program was a miss, right? And I think it's adding tremendous value. So that was a kind of a PSA for SB 2806. And then the last thing for those, I think you all agree and understand the importance of this for our community to drive, whether it's dual use ventures or new business creation or job creation, very important. So really why Cindy is and the HCDC team is so keen on doing these programs is to really try and get more engagement from the community for SBIR and SIDR. And I would leave with one last thing is if you guys have topics that you feel like are not being covered either through the university or in collaboration with HCDC, let Cindy know, let us know, and we certainly can go hunt and try and bring some of those opportunities forward. And so please do that. So I'm going to stop here and then introduce Cindy again, and Cindy can take the mic and introduce Kevin. Thanks, Cindy. Back to you.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to make one note on your comments about ledge. So the bill 2806, SB 2806, is actually for phase 2 and phase 3, not phase 0. So phase 0 and phase 1 are already in the budget. So just wanted to make that note. And then also one other note that our job fair, our tech job fair is on tomorrow. So if you're not participating, and I don't know if you heard about the whole fiasco that happened a couple of weeks ago where our job fair platform crashed and died. So it's rescheduled to tomorrow. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes well. So if you are free, come check it out. And now I will introduce Kevin Miyashiro, who has tons of experience and he knows everybody in the community. And I'm excited to hear his story. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Kevin. Take it away.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Steve. So yeah, so hopefully this will be good and insightful for everybody. The topic for today is the journey, including SBIR, including commercialization, and in the case of TeraSys, the eventual acquisition of the company. The way that we're going to be talking about this is through 3 interwoven themes. The first is the actual journey itself. How did we start in the SBIR community, and what were those waypoints along the way, and how we ended up selling the business? The second point is how we leverage SBIR contracts to secure what I'm going to call non-obvious paths to commercialization. And I'm going to build on that theme because the third theme here is dispelling what I call the 1% success stories. These are the stories that we all read about in the media and TechCrunch, the proverbial unicorns of the world. Those are exciting, they do happen, but they're about 1% of the business activity that happens both in commercialization as well as an acquisition. So we're going to be exploring the hows and whys of what I call the 99% of the rest of us can both commercialize and possibly sell your business one day. Before we dive into that, I want to briefly introduce Pacific Impact Zone. We are a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered in Hawaii. We're committed to growing the economy, specifically in the high technology sector and the defense and dual use arenas for the state. We have 3 service pillars for how we're bringing value to the community. The first is what we call workforce development. This is both for upskilling and reskilling the technical skill sets in the technology arena. The other piece is business acumen. primarily for founders and entrepreneurs to help us understand how to transform yourselves from a technologist to a business owner. So topics like today are really falling under that aspect of business acumen for workforce development. We also want to make folks aware of the fact that we are partnering with numerous organizations throughout the state, both on the state sector as well as in the private sector, to build what we call the Pacific Innovation and Experimentation Center. This is specifically designed to help de-risk the most common problem for startups, which is the finding of the product market fit. Very specifically for deep tech companies have unique challenges in demonstrating the value proposition that they have to their customers. So the Pacific Innovation and Experimentation Center is designed to enable demonstration and experimentation at cost points that are basically cost prohibitive for most small businesses, and to enable a nexus point for collaboration in the community. The last pillar is what we call contracting and connections. For anybody in the federal space, you know that finding the right contract is tough. Having the right contract could be a game changer for making your business grow, as well as connections. While it may be contrived, it is completely true that it's not about what you know, it is much more about who you know. So Pacific Impact Zone is building a series of tools and networking maps to help bring eyeballs into the state for partnering opportunities, as well as to help organizations inside of the state find funding and partnering opportunities outside of the state. So for anyone that wants to talk about any of these areas in detail, please feel free to reach out to me and we'll happily talk about it with you offline. But now let's flip over to the TeraSys journey itself. So we started the company in 2007, very quickly moved into the MIC in 2008. That's where we met our friends and landlords, HTDC. We've been friends with them ever since then, which is why we're on webinars like this today. An organization called HTTV, the Hawaii Technology Development Venture, was a big source of support for us. And we also won our first SBIR in 2008. This was topic N08-174. That number is burned into my brain by now because it was the very first one that we won. We had a perfect success rate at that point. We submitted one proposal, we won one proposal, 100%. It's all downhill from there, right? So we also got our first SBIR matching grant. So thanks to the HTDC team, there were a lot of support organizations in place, breathing life into our nascent small company. In many ways, it was the right time, right place. It was nothing that we did, but the macroeconomic conditions were ripe for a company like ours to be right where the government customer base needed us. So from 2009 to 2011, a lot of very positive things were happening against the backdrop of the war that we were engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. We were sending our armed service men and women out to theater. And unfortunately, the insurgents were very effective at using a device known as the improvised explosive device to harm and kill many of our men and women in theater. The military and a lot of the lead government contractors created a countermeasure that today is known as CREW, the Counter RC IED Electronic Warfare System. This system jammed the ability for the IEDs to be remotely detonated, which is the most common way that they set off these bombs. That was a bona fide life-saving device. It really had a massive, powerful, positive impact on our war effort. Because it was fielded so quickly, however, it had an unintended consequence, which was that it was equally as effective at jamming our own radio communications. So whenever our troops left the wire, which means they were no longer under the protection of the base, they had a nearly impossible choice to make. Leave the jammer on, protect ourselves from a roadside bomb, but know that if anything goes wrong, we cannot call for help. When the military realized that, they stood up something that is not a common occurrence, which is the creation of what's called a Joint Urgent Operational Needs Statement, a JUONS. A JUONS only happens when there's a bona fide loss of life or limb and a solution is needed now. The industry scrambled around that. And even though we were very much finding our sea legs, TeraSys got pulled into a world. We didn't understand what was happening. So we got pulled into this world because our innovation, our technology was needed for solving this problem. So we very quickly went from a phase 1 to a phase 2, from a phase 2 to a phase 2.5, all in the SBIR era, and we were actually getting purchase orders remarkably rapidly through this time frame. So things were really beginning to pick up for us. However, as any story would have, it wasn't a complete, Cinderella ride through and through. We also had our share of back-to-back body blows. So the first body blow was in 2011. Congress got together and decided that enough was enough. They were tired of having what we call earmark spending going on. They thought that it was out of control. So they put a moratorium on earmarks. For anybody that was in the defense industry in Hawaii in that time frame, you remember we had over $500 million every year of earmark spending coming into our state because of Senator Renoit. He was extremely effective at really bringing a ton of funding into our state to grow our economy. That all came to an end overnight when the moratorium came in. If that wasn't enough, in 2012, Congress went even further to get the spending under control and imposed what they call sequestration. This was an across-the-board cut of 10 to 12%. All defense programs were cut by 10%. In practice, what actually happened, though, was that some programs were saved more than others. And so some programs got dropped by much more than 10%. The biggest hit was taken in the R&D arena. They felt that R&D is tomorrow's thing, so we can fund it tomorrow because they had to fund the production programs of today. At that point in time, over 80% of our revenue was coming from R&D, the thing that took the biggest hit. So this was a bona fide existential crisis for our company. So it presented us with a choice: adapt or close our doors. We could take the path to the left, which was just put our head in the sand. Just keep plowing forward, saying we're an R&D company, that's what we know how to do. We're just going to hope for the best. Or we could take the path to the right and adapt and do what frankly everybody says to do, which is go get SBIR funding, but then go commercialize it, get off of SBIRs. We decided to go the second route, but the thing is, just because you pick a path doesn't mean that you know how to take that path. We had no idea how to do that. And so with the company on the line, here was the thing. We could take everything that we knew, which was not much, and do what we believed SBIR was for. You get a phase 1, then you get a phase 2, then you get a phase 3 into what is often called a program of record. These are very long-term production programs that can last over a decade. For those companies that get them, you are essentially set for life. That's the good news. The bad news is there's only a couple hundred of these a year. So given that there's 50, 70, 80,000 SBIR companies out there in the country, your odds are painfully low of taking exactly what you built in the phase 1 and transitioning it into one of these long-term programs of record. Most companies will run out of money before that happens. So there's another alternative path, which is the SBIR program does talk about. You don't just need to transition it into the government world. You can dual use it. You can go out into the commercial world and sell what we funded you to do commercially. But what they're really talking about is taking what they funded you to do in phase 1 and essentially predict the future 3 to 4 years ahead of time, because it takes you that long to finish your R&D. And to know that precisely what you got funded to do is precisely what the commercial sector wants from you. There are probably a few thousand of those a year, but that is still a painfully low probability of success. There's a third thing that almost nobody talks about that is very quietly happening day in and day out in the marketplace, which is to become what we call an approved supplier in the manufacturing sector, to deliver what the customer wants based often loosely on your SBIR technology. There are tens of thousands of these kinds of opportunities every year, not talked about, very quietly happening. So we're going to focus on this third one for the next few minutes. The way to get there in the manufacturing sector is to become what we call an approved supplier. An approved supplier is a company where the upper tier manufacturer has basically kicked the tires. They verify that you are a supplier that comes through on promises. How does this AVL get used? What happens is every time a corporate buyer has a new requirement, a new program, they will always start with the AVL. Let's be very clear. The corporate buyers are good at many things, but there's no way they can understand all of the technology they're buying. And many times they don't even bother. So they just do keyword searches. If you're in the keyword search and you're in the AVL, you're good. If you're not, you're not. But this is how they start the process of reaching out and finding sources of supply. As an example, Lockheed Martin spent over $3 billion through their AVL in 2019. This is a ton of money that they're spending every year. And that's just one company. Now, you as a small business, why should you care about this? Because in the case of the AVL, in the case of corporate buyers, the buyers coming to you. This is what we call an inbound sales channel. For anybody here watching this webinar, a lot of you, I suspect, are SBIR companies, phase 1, phase 2 SBIR companies. You know how painful it is to write an SBIR proposal. The average estimate is 120 man hours to write one phase 1 proposal. And oftentimes you're doing it 3 or 4 cycles a year. You're probably pumping out 3 or 4 proposals per round. It is 1,000+ person hours every single year in proposals with a 12% average win rate. That's what we call an outbound channel because you are reaching out to the customer. Wouldn't you love to have a situation where the buyer comes to you, they already know they have the money, they've already pre-qualified you, they're not going to promise that they're going to buy it from you directly, but all you got to do is give them a quote, a half-page piece of paper and a quote. Life is very different from a sales perspective when you have an inbound sales channel. In addition to that, because of the nature of the buying process, a ton of these kinds of new programs that come through the AVL have a high probability of leading to what we call a sole source production opportunity. Because what they will always try to do first is they'll always try to buy COTS parts, commercial off the shelf. But a huge chunk of the time, they can't find anything that is the exact size, exact specifications, and maybe possibly the right price. So what they do is they go to their AVL, they say, this is what we want, make it for me. When you become the chosen supplier that makes it for them, guess what? You are the only game in town because there is no COTS equivalent for that. When you have a sole source opportunity, it's very, very sticky. It's very hard to unseat a sole source supplier. And now you got orders for years to come. As a business owner, that's why you want this. So now we're going to get into the how. Okay, great. We love AVLs. We love sole source. How? I'm going to share 2 examples with you from the TeraSys history. The first one was with a customer called General Dynamics. This is one of the large tier 1 OEMs in the defense industry. So in 2012, they contacted us because we followed the instructions from the SBIR program. We filled out the non-proprietary abstract. We gave them a bunch of keywords and they posted it on the website. One of those keywords was co-site interference. Unbeknownst to us, General Dynamics had a new program. The buyer didn't know what co-site interference was, but she knew that they needed it to fulfill their deliverables to their customer. She searched within the AVL, nothing. There were no suppliers in their AVL that matched the keyword co-site interference. So she goes out to the internet to search for sources of supply. She found us. She sent us an invitation to bid. It was a competitive bid. She wasn't going to give it to us, so we had to win the order because we were not an approved supplier. We did. So they awarded us a small study contract. You can see it's not much, $70,000. I want to be clear about something. Just because they cut us a purchase order doesn't mean they approved us as a supplier. We were a supplier, but we were not an approved supplier. There is a difference here. We performed well on that project. We delivered on our promises. So they gave us a phase 2. The dollar amount grew a little over 200 grand the next time. Still not an approved supplier. 2015 and beyond, now this is where things get interesting. So we did finally become an approved supplier, 2015. All told, about $1 million of follow-on orders without writing a single proposal. We had to write, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 quotes, no proposals. Life is very different when you become an approved supplier. Here are the upshots. Look at the timetable. 3 years to become an approved supplier. This is not a fast journey because the customer was kicking the tires. Even though we delivered good once, wasn't enough. They had to expand our scope. We had to come through a second time, on quality. And then they're satisfied to tell their buyers, this company is reputable, they delivered, we can put them in the list. Second thing, the phase 1 SBIR that we were working on at the time was a hardware project to solve this co-site interference thing. What General Dynamics wanted us to do was a software project. So it was related to, but not even remotely identical to the SBIR. So this is an example of getting a commercial thing. This was a very, very profitable service software project based on work that we were doing for our SBIR. Here's a second example to a government customer. We were working in a phase 2 at the time. One of the government engineers happened to be buddies with another government customer that had a requirement. He said, I know who you should talk to. Go call these TeraSys guys. They reached out to us. We got all excited. We prepared a pitch. We pitched them hard. By we, I really mean me. I pitched them hard on how cool our stuff was, how innovative it was. We had a patent behind it. They very patiently listened. And then they said, that's cool. We're not interested in that. Would you like to hear what we would like to have from you? So thankfully, everybody told me to shut up so they could talk. We heard them out. We looked at their RFP. We submitted a quote. It was competitive. We won the competitive bid. We got an order. Not bad. It was about $500,000 for non-recurring engineering, the design phase, and an opportunity to build the initial production order, about a 25-unit quantity. We did leverage techniques that we were working on in that phase 2 to build this product. So again, related to but not identical to the SBIR work. From 2013 to 2018, we had a couple of follow-on orders. By the time it was all said and done, we ended up producing over 100 of this one part. But look at this quote that we got, that the TeraSys products for one of only 3 LRUs. An LRU is a line replaceable unit. It's like a electronic module inside of this government vehicle that had no field returns. And that's why they kept coming back to us. Okay, so if I remember correctly, there were probably 20 to 30 of these LRUs inside of this vehicle. Only 3 never ever failed. And this is a military vehicle. It goes overseas. It doesn't get to drive up and down H1 on smooth roads. This is a vehicle that goes over rocks, bumps, streams. I mean, your parts have to stand what we call the mil standard 810 shock and vibration. It's not so much about innovation as it is about quality and reliability when you're in production. Because the upshot is, it's a much more common variation of what we call finding product market fit. It is doing what your customer wants instead of selling what you want to build. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we fail to understand that nuance because we talk too much, like I was doing at that time. Second thing, the innovation got us in the door. The other engineer that was working with us, he loved what we were doing. So innovation, uniqueness has its place in the marketplace because people get excited about it. They want to talk about it. That's what got us in the door. But what kept us there had nothing to do with our innovation. It had everything to do with our ability to be an on-time, on-quality supplier. There's a mental shift in the commercialization cycle. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the acquisition side. So we've talked about commercialization. Now we're going to talk about acquisition. So in 2012, we had a company called Sierra Nevada that approached us and said, we would like to buy your company. Again, we're 4 years in. Okay, we're still growing. We're still learning how to be a business. And we already have a company that wants to come and buy us. Sure, let's talk about it. So they bring out their due diligence team. In roughly 30 days, they finished what they call their initial due diligence. Paul, the general manager, called me, said, Kevin, we need to talk. I swear there is no conversation that ever starts with that phrase that is going to go well, right? So Paul had to deliver the very bad news to me that the due diligence team suggested that they not move forward with the acquisition. That was kind of okay because we weren't looking to sell the company anyway. What was much harder to swallow was that he also wanted to share with me as a learning opportunity for us that the team concluded that TeraSys was worthless. So for anybody here that's a founder or a business owner, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into your business. It's your ideas, it's your energy, it's your hours. It's your time sacrificed away from your family. We all believe that our businesses are extremely valuable because they're ours. And then to have a team who specializes, they are very, very good at determining future value for a business. To tell you that your business is worthless is probably one of the biggest gut punches that an entrepreneur can receive. But I had to listen to it. And so they helped me understand why, which is because we were just a funded research house. We had a couple of things that we'd gotten out a few parts here and there, but by and large, they saw right through all of that. They knew that we were nothing but an SBIR R&D house. And they said, while you guys are smart, you guys got some cool stuff, that's not a real business. I'm very sorry. So they moved on. We moved on. We took our licks and we moved on. But 2 years later, another company called Zotera came and wanted to buy us. We were obviously the hot kids because 2 companies wanted to buy us. Same thing. They went into initial due diligence right on the clock. 30 days later, Dan calls me. Kevin, we need to talk. You got to be kidding me. Same thing, right? All right, Dan, all right. It's because we're worthless, right? No, actually, that's not true. Actually, we think that your business could be worth something, but the problem is your market's too small. So unfortunately, I have to tell you that we can't move forward with the acquisition. Because basically what they were saying was that we were a whale in a puddle. That's not a compliment. That's not saying that you're huge and you're awesome. It means that you happen to have mastered a market so tiny, nobody else cares. Yeah, you made profits. Yeah, you made products. Yeah, they were good products. Nobody cares. Another painful lesson learned in the process of having very professional, very highly skilled due diligence people coming in and telling you what your business is worth. Thankfully, 5 years later, Quinstar came in, wanted to buy us. That time the deal goes through. So look at the differences now. They wanted to access an adjacent market segment. In our nomenclature, they live up in the upper frequency range. We live in the lower frequency range. So we had market penetration they didn't have. It was an easy way for them to acquire a new market channel. But I want to be clear, we were convinced we had IP, but the only reason that they cared about our IP is because it generated product sales. It wasn't because we had a patent that was approved by the patent office. It wasn't because we had all these simulations and things like that. It was because we were generating sales. Second thing, they wanted to integrate our playbooks. That was completely unexpected to me. We had playbooks for sales and engineering. For anybody that knows anything about TeraSys, you know that we were major culture geeks. We had all kinds of culture stuff going on. And of all things, that was one of the things that was actually very valuable to Quinstar, is they wanted to integrate our playbooks to fill gaps in their growth strategy. So look at the translation here. Again, yes, we all have IP. We all think our stuff is awesome and cool. But through the eyes of an M&A buyer, that only matters in so much as how do you generate sales from that? If you can't generate sales, I'm sorry, it's not worth anything, no matter how cool you think it is. Second thing, intangible assets, what we often refer to as goodwill. Some people put them on the balance sheet, most people don't. Very unexpected outcome that a buyer will place a dollar value on intangible assets. But here's the key. The only reason that it was valuable to Quinstar was because we had documented it. We had documented it in a way where they could use it. So in case everybody from TeraSys got hit by a bus because they already paid for it, they could still use it. And that's the key. You can't have intangible assets that are locked in your head. if you're going to try to use it to drive up the value of your M&A. It must be documented, and it must be documented in a way that somebody else can use it. Very interesting lessons that we got out of this. So now we're going to start to bring things to a close. My first statement is this: if I knew then what I knew now, I am positive we left money on the table in acquisition. Every founder that I know that sells their business says the same thing. Man, if I had only done X, Y, and Z differently, my valuation would have been from this to this. We all feel that way. It's never perfect. Armed with the cumulative knowledge of my own experience, plus having other friends that have sold their businesses, and having had the privilege of being part of a private equity group where I was on the buy side of the ledger, where I was helping to buy companies, what I can say is this: if you only have enough time and energy to focus on one or two things, these two things here are the things that are almost guaranteed to make the biggest difference in the sale of your business. First is you have to get your EBITDA up, your profits. You got to get it up. You got to get it above the market comparable. Just like selling your house, they're going to look at your house against market comps. Again, these buyers are crazy sophisticated. These due diligence teams are good. It's like they go to school for that. They practice it for years, and they're good. So what they will do is they will take a very reductive look to your business. You think it's all cool and fancy. You're the only one of your kind. It's not true. They will reduce it all the way down to you have a comparable thing of you're a game controller company. You're a vitamin pill company, whatever it is. And they're going to know the average profit margin for your sector is 15%. If your profit margin is 7%, you're going to get dinged. So if you're going to ever want to sell your company, figure out what reductive market sector a buyer is likely going to put you into, figure out what those margins are, and make sure you're comparable or above that. Number one. Number two, you need to prove that your sales and your profits are predictable. Because when a buyer comes in, what they're primarily looking at is what are the odds that your business will be worth more tomorrow than it is today. They're buying future value. And if your sales are all over the place, it scares them from a predictability perspective. So the more you can show a consistent track record, and not only a consistent track record, but how and why that track record is so consistent, the more likely they are to say, I can extrapolate into the future. I can see how much more valuable it is. I'm willing to pay for it. Predictability is huge in the eyes of a buyer. Looking back, I wanted to be the cool kid. Everybody wants to be the cool kid. All founders want to be the cool kid. We want to be the ones written about in TechCrunch, like these two guys over here that have your business name associated with that ever so cool name, Unicorn. Everybody wants that. But here's the thing. That's what I call the 1% of the transactions. That's what we see. That's what we read about. That's what we get excited about. But if you pull back the curtain, look at these numbers. In 2020, over 17,000 acquisitions happened right in the middle of COVID. In the private equity group that I was with, they did their final due diligence with somebody walking around the building with an iPhone. They were giving them a virtual tour with a camera and an iPhone because they didn't want to travel because of COVID. 17,000 deals happened like this. We read about 1%. Okay, $700 million average deal size. That's why it's cool to read about that stuff. But you strip it away and watch what happens. If you take the top 1% of the deals off and you drop it off, the average deal size drops to 130 million. You take the top 20% off, lop it away. The average deal size drops down to $40 million. Frankly, from a newsworthy perspective, that's not newsworthy enough. That's why nobody talks about it. But 16,900 and change acquisitions are happening very quietly, no fanfare, for 10, 20, $30 million for a founder. That is a life-changing experience, even without the fanfare. This same thing is true for commercialization. We read about the 1% success stories, the super perfect phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You were such a good predictor of the future that you knew it before everybody else did. You got into a program of record. Awesome. Of course, they're going to celebrate those wins. But there are tens of thousands that are very quietly generating very sticky, very profitable commercialization sales by doing a non-obvious route because nobody else is talking about. So my suggestion is to play the odds. One of the other things that we look at in M&A is what we call customer concentration, because it's a big form of risk. They will look for, and they would much rather see on your records that you have 100 orders of $50,000 a piece. They would love to see that versus 99 orders for $10,000, one giant order for 4.9 million. Why? Because of risk. Because if you lose that one $4.9 million customer, your business is screwed, right? So from a diversification perspective, this is where you want to be. Even if you never want to sell your business, you want to have diversity in your customer base. Again, learning from our mistakes, learning from my mistakes. Stop trying to sell what you want to sell. It's not about you, it's what the customer wants to buy. If you get lucky and they want to buy what you want to sell, awesome. But it is much more likely to be able to do the discovery process and figure out what it is that they want to buy from you. The magic phrase goes something like this. Yeah, Kevin, stop talking about how cool your stuff is. Can we please talk now? It's great, but could you do this instead? Because now you're onto something. Look for that as you're out there talking to customers. The last piece is evolving the founder mindset. There was a lot of growth that we had to do. There's a lot of growth that I had to do as a founder, especially as a technology founder. It started because I was an engineer. Many of the scientists and engineers, that's why we start companies, because we can build something cool. We can build it with our hands, build it with our minds. That's great. But to evolve your company, it's all the non-technical stuff. We have to get better at sales. We have to get better at operations. And I have to get better as a leader. And you don't learn this stuff in engineering school. We just don't teach this stuff there. We had to evolve, and it was my attitude that had to shift first from we work on bleeding edge cool tech stuff because we can, to we are an on-time, on-quality, reputable supplier. I used to look at that and go, that is lame, that is boring, it sucks. Because it's not exciting. I get it. But to be a reputable supplier, and if you ever want to sell your business, to be a low risk business to buy, that's the stuff that matters. Because I will further reinforce, as founders, we are very risk tolerant. If we were risk adverse, we wouldn't start a company in the first place. But the rest of the world is not like us. Buyers in production programs, buyers in M&A are exceedingly risk averse. It was so hard for me to get my head around that and to learn how to live in the world of risk aversion when I am so inherently risk tolerant. Production contract managers live and die on the elimination of risk. I have met more than my fair share of production managers who actually look at novelty as a risk itself because it implies uncertainty. It terrifies them. M&A buyers, I cannot tell you how incredibly skillful M&A buyers are. You know, as engineers and scientists, we're like, I got a bachelor's, master's, I got a doctorate, I'm super smart. We got nothing on due diligence buyers. They are crazy, crazy good. They showed me all parts of our business that I didn't even know what the risks were. They helped me understand more about my business than me, myself, and it's my business. They are crazy good. Do not underestimate their skill at finding risk for future performance. They are extremely good. And so with all of that, how HCDC and Pacific Impact Zone can help. If you want customers to come to you, in other words, use inbound sales, and you're tired of writing proposal after proposal after proposal and having a 12% win rate. If you want to go core customer once, then deliver the same thing again and again and again. It might seem a little boring. That's where all of the profits are made. If these kinds of things resonate with you, then I ask, reach out to Cindy, reach out to me so we can help you. HCDC has funded Pacific Impact Zone to come in and do assessments for the purposes of commercialization. We will inventory your saleable assets, and we will help deliver a strategy for increasing the odds of commercializing what it is you've got in very non-obvious ways that might not be written about in the media, but are far more likely to successfully get you into a path to commercialization. So with that, we are good. If there are any questions or comments, we can open the floor to anybody for anything that they'd like to talk about.
Thank you, Kevin. So anybody who wants to ask questions, you can unmute yourself. Go ahead. So I just wanted to make a note that Isar, one of our attendees, hey Isar, is actually going through this process with Kevin. And so he is our first client of Kevin's through this HTDC and PIZ joint partnership. And so hopefully it's all good things. Any comments, Isar?
Thank you, Kevin. This was really golden nuggets that you put out there. And a lot of it is really just good business practices. We're going through the process. We've been working on our tech for the past few years, a lot of R&D funding, and we're still heavy R&D, but we're now shifting the balance as we speak. And we need systems and methods to essentially kind of help us, accelerate us in the commercialization aspect. And these are what Kevin mentioned, things that I think about and keeps sleep away from me. And so knowing that there's somebody that has walked the path and has landed, these sole source contracts before, that's a big deal. And also how do you improve the business operations and all other aspects to enhance enhance the business sustainability, essentially. Even if the M&A doesn't come at the end, these are all good practices to have to be able to continue operating and being a sustainable business that doesn't just rely on R&D. And that's the major goal for me. Thank you, Kevin. It was awesome.
Thanks, Isar.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I know that not as many people that registered were able to attend, but if it's okay with you, is it okay to share this video?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. Because I did see on your slides, you had some proprietary slides.
Oh,
Is
that's
that
because I
okay?
didn't delete them. It's fine.
Okay. Good. So anybody else?
Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, please, sorry.
Hey,
You're
Kevin,
on.
excellent job. Very, very impressed. And I don't know if we're in the market to sell our business at the moment, but I think there's a lot of things you brought up that we probably could take a harder look at to make sure that we are kind of following a path that leads someplace instead of, the kind of ad hoc processes that a lot of people go through.
Right.
Are you putting together some kind of a offering for business like us where you can come in, kind of help us along?
So we'll have to take that one offline. That's something that Cindy and I can discuss. The funding source comes from the SBA, and so we need to stay true to the spirit of that. But either way, we'll follow up with you offline.
Okay,
And we'll see how we can support you.
sounds great. We'd love to see you come help us and then have the SBA pay for it. That'd be awesome.
That's the way to do it. Hey, Rob, do you have my email address?
I'm sure I do. Yeah.
I'll drop it in here.
Great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Rob. And thank you. If anybody else has any questions or thoughts for Kevin? No, okay, I'm going to stop the recording.